Good evening. Welcome to WooTube. How's everyone doing today? I hope you have had a good weekend. Whatever you've been doing, maybe you've been playing Netrunner with like 250 other people in San Francisco. It was in San Francisco, right? Yeah, probably. I'm probably right there. Maybe you're at Worlds. If you were, I hope you had a fantastic time. It looked to be a pretty incredible event, to be quite honest. I was keeping up with the stream where I could, um, while it was still not too late on most days, and then last night I woke up at about, I don't know, 1:30, 2 a.m. in the morning, and I kind of realised that I probably wasn't going to get back to sleep until I'd at least checked out a little bit. So I got to watch some of the like later stages of the Top Cut live before I dozed back off. And then fantastically, I got to watch the final this morning, completely spoiler free. Greetings, David. Always good to have you in the chat. Yeah, managed to watch the finals unspoiled. I just avoided all like social media this morning. I turned on the finals or turned on the sort of stream and flicked and just because I knew that sooner rather than later I would read something and find out who won, and I wanted to watch the final game, and I was really glad I did. If you haven't seen it yet, then I'm going to suggest that you go and watch at least the final game. The like rounds running up to the final game are a bit weird and not worth watching. In some ways, they're like the games are. Yeah, there's issues with the games. But the finals is one hell of a good game. Hello, Holtz. It's You need to set aside a little bit of time. It's not a super short one, or ones. Yeah, but it's good. Oh, it's good. And anyway, I will be doing spoilers tonight. So if you haven't watched it, go and watch it now. Then come back and watch it. Semi-final was a bit of a shame. It was. I mean that, and even the game before it, like Santa versus Soccer, with like kind of came down to Santa making like maybe like what could be considered a game losing error, possibly, if you go and watch it. Anyway, yeah, very sensible Holtz. Like, you watch it before you watch anything. Game of Droids. What is this Isla deck doing? I'm curious, but I never caught it on stream. I don't know if I saw it on stream, but funnily enough, like I looked at it, and Timmy Wong is before my time, right? However, I am very aware of his name as someone who is first and foremost a deck builder and someone who likes to build slightly off meta and like weird decks. I'm very aware of Timmy Wong, and I'm very aware that he was able to build decks which made no sense to anyone else but made sense to him, and he'd turn up to tournaments and smash it out of the park with them. And actually it was one of the decks I was most curious about, and so I loaded it up today. And JNet Casual, you know, is what it is, but it went like 4-0 in pretty quick succession. You look at it and it's like, feels like it's missing like one or two pieces, but it's kind of got, how I found it, it's got just enough econ to win the game, like in that perfect kind of perfect sense. Like every single game I was like, you know, I had like just what I needed at the times, and I didn't feel like as great as like there's no like propeller, for instance, so I was like running into brands and being like, do I really want to get out like a cleaver and break this for like 10 gajillion credits? Like, no, not really. I'd love it if there was a propeller in here, but there's not, and I just had to make do without it. But yeah, we'll look at that in a second, because I did spend a little bit of the day um, loading the decks, or loading most of the decks into my JNet. Not into my JNet, into my Netrunner DB. Mainly because I find it much easier to pass these lists here. And B, we can do some nice compare and contrast things using the tools which NRDB gives us, and also just like bringing two decks side by side. So I've essentially got all of the Corp decks, with the exception of Patrick's Rotoms, because it's PD. It's a Rotom PD deck. The spiciest thing in it is the Eli. Eli 1.0 is like the spicy card. We don't need to talk about that. Hey, Lazy, how's it going? Day's good. Been catching up with world stuff, and doing some work and trying to get my daughter to go to bed. From the sounds of it, still not asleep. I have passed that over. So I've opened now. Spoilers. I did say there'd be spoilers. These are your spoilers. This is the final standings from the World Championships. Arazan taking it in first place, and I have to give a massive shout out to Arazan, because outside of people who may or may not be on my testing team, Arazan had the list which I most wanted to win Worlds. Once the deck lists were revealed, it's like, I would love it if one of the tiebreakers won Worlds, and like my bet was on Jai. I had a large feeling that Jai was going to take it this year, and after day one, it was looking pretty good. And if Jai wasn't going to win, and none of the other tiebreakers were going to win, then I wanted Arazan to take it because of his deck list. I didn't necessarily think he would, but he did. Deer in second place, and Deer's just fantastic. Like, such a great player. They're so awesome. If you haven't had a chance to like watch the finals, but also watch the exit interview with Deer, their personality just comes across so well. A few things they said about like how they built their deck is fantastic, like absolutely fascinating. Couldn't have hoped for a better final in terms of like the good vibes that were going on the table, even though there was like some real mean decks on like kind of both sides. Yeah, and Arazan, so straight up, Arazan has been grinding that Ari, and like versions of that Arasana we've seen, like Slap Vandal Poison Vial versions we've seen, basically has been like absolutely honing in on this Arasana, but not just like playing Arasana, playing this very kind of specific version of Arasana, which has always had at least 2 copies of Spree in it, as far as I'm aware. Actually pointing out that we put Spree kind of low in the tier list. I haven't had time to clip this yet, but I wanted to have ready for tonight just the clip of Axu telling me that we were not putting Spree anywhere apart from in the binder fodder, like in F tier or whatever it was. And I think I just strong-armed it into about C tier in the end. So, sometimes you just got to learn how to read Shaper events, Axu. Like, some of us are really good at working out the power levels there. Like, first time, every time, always right. So then, all right, we got obviously soccer in third. I mean, still not bad. Okay, we didn't get the three-peat. Um, Soccer was trying to like he was trying to take maths lessons from Jai. He was trying to times by three. He was like, right, I've done worlds once, and then I can do worlds twice, and then this time I'm gonna times by three, and I'll do worlds three times. But he times the wrong thing by three, and he came third. And the King smashing it out into fourth. Very unfortunately, actually had to pull out after getting to fourth place, due to another commitment which he couldn't get out of. Santa and Tuno in fifth and sixth. Then massive shout out to Jai, who just smashed it through day one, completely undefeated. Soccer did have a curse. Yeah, Soccer had like a bit of a cursed run. Maybe the gods had given, like, maybe Soccer's luck has just dried up. I don't believe that to be the case. And it's not just luck. We know that, but my word, does Soccer draw well sometimes. But you know, if you just put the right cards in your deck, then you always draw the right cards, right? And yeah, Soccer kind of went out, or didn't go out. Yeah, went out in like a pretty unfortunate manner, but that will happen sometimes. If you don't know, like, lost 6 points turn one. I think it was turn one. I didn't actually watch the game because someone just told me about. I heard about it after I watched the finals, and I was like, it's probably not worth watching. But yeah, huge shout out to Jai, and then Centling in eighth, Night Ride in ninth. I think Night Ride was like the only crim, if I'm right. I will very quickly scroll down. I might be incorrect. I'm correct. So Night Ride was on Sable. Spicy forged activation orders in here. This is like quite nice, like ag infusion tech. And twinning, I think here, twinning and awake as the like win con. Yeah, it is only 2 minutes long. Maybe I'll go and do that. Timmy Wong, sorry, Tak. I don't really know too much about Tak. I know Tak was on Asa and Lat, I want to say, yes. Timmy Wong smashed it through day one and then continued doing great in day two, playing Isla. Yeah, repping Isla in the top 16 of Worlds. We'll have a look at this list in a minute because I just think it's wild and it's fun. Ruben Peters, fellow tiebreaker, and Seb K, another fellow tiebreaker, also making it into top 16. Great shouts from them. Rotom doing very well. Obviously, some people I'm sure had Rotom down to win the thing, but you know, the guy doesn't miss when it comes to making top cuts. Passive Molt, who I'm unaware of, but who has fantastic hair. I caught the game Passive Molt versus D on day, I think it was day 2, like earlier on in the day, like before it gets through to the top cut, I'm pretty sure. I could be wrong. It might have been in day 1. I'll try and find when it was, but go and try and find that game because that is an amazing game and it's got one particular turn which is just incredible. And then CTZ smashing it out in the top cut as well. Watching CTZ on stream is like one of the most fun things you can do. Just the like sheer laid back cool that guy has is insane. You can just tell he's enjoying every minute. It's great. Like he's on stream a couple of times, but particularly the game against Iron Fox. When Iron Fox, like, Red Planet couriers out an Atlas with 7 tokens, and you just see CTZ lose it in, like, enjoying the moment because he just loves to see that. Rotom is the only PD and the canonical PD. Yeah, Rotom, I refer to it as Rotom PD. Like if you're playing like good stuff PD with like Void and Skunkworks, it's Rotom PD. And then I can't shout out everyone, but I've got to give a huge like big up to XDG. XDG, the member of the Tiebreakers, and has been grinding for the last, like, I don't know, months, like definitely weeks, but like maybe 4 weeks, maybe 2 months, like absolutely grinding, always looking for games, always playing games, testing different decks, trying like different matchups, wanting to test against different stuff, and just did phenomenally well. Is like a reasonably recent player in terms of like picking things up, but went well above and beyond at this tournament. So like huge shout out to XDG. Yeah. So let's have a little look at some of these decks because there were some pretty interesting things that came out. I mainly want to look, or I'm going to start. I guess we start by looking at the runners. I don't know, because the runners we can do quite quickly because out of the runners in the top cut, I don't think there's an easy way to see this apart from like scanning through. I haven't loaded all the runners up because most of them, and when I say most, I think it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 of them are on lat. And I've been through. They're all very, like, I'm not going to talk about the lats. They're boring. Like, they're all doing the same thing. The only interesting thing about the lat decks, the only thing that, like, piqued my interest when I was looking through them, when I was comparing them all, and I'm not going to get them all up on screen to do that, but they all have different breaker suites, or a different breaker option. Good evening, Thenchling. Congratulations on 8th place, top 8. You must get some pretty good swag for that, right? Are you like at 8? Do you get a deck box? Is that, I can't remember how many deck boxes there were, but either way, like I'm sure you're on the way home. It's there's some pretty cool swag. I'm probably going to talk about one of your decks in a second, so please feel free to. Yeah, you got a cool one on deck box. They were so awesome. Feel free to shout me down if I shout out anything wrong. But yeah, no offense to your lat deck. I'm sure it was fun, but they're all the same, right? They just all have slightly different. None of them have exactly the same breaking solution, which is really fascinating. All of them have at least one different thing. Really, really, really wild. As in, there's not a correct breaker suite option right now, which is like kind of I find that interesting. The rest of the decks, they're the same. Some of them are Swift, some of them are on Hannah wheels, what have you. I've realised that I haven't copied Santa's list over, which. No, Santa's list was it was Man in the Moons, which I was thinking of. So there are 3 runner decks which I think we should have a quick look at. The first one is obviously Timmy Wong's. So he turns up with Isla, and like who, I mean, outside of like some people were like, hey, maybe the Isla deck is big. So everyone sees Isla and they're like, oh. Timmy Wong's brought, the Man in the Moon Santa Isla deck with Blue World Tree, right? And it's very much not that. So this is what Timmy Wong was playing. Notably, a kind of pretty interesting breaker suite. So we've got Takobi as our like boosting option, which I mean I'm a big fan of. Means that alongside Cleaver we can get through brands pretty efficiently. We've got Euler, which turned up pretty often. We see this in quite a few. This is like has turned out to be like a pretty good meta call in terms of decoder. I hate the fact that this costs 2 on the off turns to break Thimblerig, and it costs 3 to break Magnet. But other than that, it's a bit different. Meteor, I somewhat disagree with you on this, and I'll get into why. Yeah, so you don't have to do the like I'm gonna play around the like lat draw thing. And I think it also allowed him to play just like 1 or 2 more like tech choices, because sometimes you just have them on VRAM and they're perfect. So he's on some real interesting cards. He's got a copy of Imp, which I don't think any other shaper is on. Even though we've got like really good potential program recursion, most of the other shapers at the moment are wanting to use their program recursion to get back their breakers. They're playing things like Euler, Revolver, Propeller, all the and so they can't really afford to use simul chips on things like Imp and Clot, whereas Timmy's like Icebreaker Suite is like a bit like flicking in and out, but still like he decided that Imp is the correct slot, and I kind of agree. Like Imp is really, really good in a lot of matchups. If you're worried about like punitive, then consider playing Imp. If you're worried about things like R+, giving you tags off stealing agendas, then play Imp. If you're worried about Fule, play Imp. So he's on an Imp, which is pretty cool. He has Mistbones and Hannah, which both like deal with the asset spam matchups quite well. And Hannah also a useful 5th click, as we have just a single copy of Deep Dive, which is interesting. This is like the least deep dives in all of the decks that are around. Imp versus Copulation is a choice a lot of people. Yeah. I think that's the interesting thing here, and Timmy's gone with the Imp over the Copulation, and I think one of the reasons for that is that he's also decided that a really good tech slot is a copy of Mad Dash, and this one is really, really interesting. Yeah, Koga, absolutely. The others are on Cup, which is like the replacement, but it works in a very, very different way, kind of. But you wouldn't play both, I don't think, unless you've got influence out the wazoo. But the Mad Dash here is super interesting, especially as it's actually really hard to line up in this deck. Like, you have an Imp, and that's it. You don't have any other way to kind of guarantee agendas are somewhere where you want. You don't even have pinholes here. There's no pinhole, so you can't like pinhole a remote, go, it's an agenda, and then Mad Dash for remote. Doesn't exist. Sorry. There is another way. So the other thing that Timmy's playing is 3 copies of Burner. And we're going to see this again in a different deck. So Burner, I think, is the one way which Timmy was planning on, like, I'm going to Burner HQ, see 3 cards from HQ, put 1 on the top, and then Mad Dash it. But yeah, no cataloger. So Burner and Imp are our sort of 2 ways of lining up a Mad Dash, or just being like absolute god mode and mad dashing archives at the correct time, or like Timmy's been playing a very long time and he's very good at the game, and he probably can just call a remote when it's the correct time. You know, you're like, that's definitely an agenda. I think I can definitely get in. I'm just gonna mad dash it. And then the rest of it is like mostly like kind of sensible stuff. We've got 2 copies of Anicam. which I think is enough in Isla because your consistency of potentially getting it in terms of either on your MVRAM or through your mulligans is good enough. Having an Anicam on your MVRAM is actually pretty strong. And then a ton of events because we're on Anicam, a couple of stone chips for like tech and draw and dealing with stuff. And also, I use these more than once a day to charge a Takobi, saving me a ton of credits and sometimes just allowing me to get in. Single daily casts, which like is really interesting. Like one daily cast, one telework contract. Like that's the kind of like deck building which you've just got to love. You're like, this is the correct amount of money, and they have felt kind of correct. Also, what kind of year are we in where Shaper can go, I don't need to play 3 daily casts? That's like Shaper has Econ at the moment. It's kind of bizarre. And it's actually, I found it really fun. It's a fun deck. Kind of weird, kind of interesting. So then, I need to talk about Two-Nose Essa. Because this is the deck which terrifies me the most. Like, I couldn't play this. This is an Essa deck. Most of it will make a lot of sense. It's on 3 copies of Bankar. We've got Nukas for draw. We've got Mystic. And 3 copies of Ghost Tongue, but only 2 copies of Marrow. Okay. Apparently enough. And then this is where it gets like crazy to me. So we've got our Icebreaking Suite is 1 copy of Begamot, obviously, is Essa. It's very, very good. 1 copy of Buzzsaw. Yep. Deals with things like Thimble Rig, which can otherwise be a real big issue. And then a Botulus and a Palangi. There is no killer in this deck. There's no killer. Tuno forfeit a game against the king in the cut. Like eventually just got to a point where it just forfeited because King was playing Ag Infusion, had like Anansi's and Sysentans rezzed everywhere. Tuna had lost all its recursion and just couldn't run anymore. Like if it ran anywhere, it dies. Yeah, it's like this is terrifying to me. One of my big things as like what I worry about when I'm playing and making decks is like getting kind of locked out. And this deck, in terms of like having no killer, when there's 2 pieces of ice right now, which will do an absolute ton of damage if you want to like Bankar through them, which is Anansi and Sysentan. Oh yeah, let's not even talk about Hammer. Let's hope that they haven't got Hammer on the inside, or you are screwed, right? You take a tag and I guess you can let the program sub fire as long as you don't have a Botulus somewhere. Yeah, but like no Lamb. Like maybe you're just hoping in the Jinteki matchup you just like Ashen and go again. But there's also no like installable recursion here. There's no DJ Fenris. There's no buffer drive. There's no like, I don't know, District 99 or something. So your Essa, you're a Bankar deck, and your only recursion is the 2 Laborites and the 1 Ashen Epilogue, which you have to like hold in your hand or play them or something. I don't know. But yeah, I'm guessing this is like just a full-on. I'm just gonna dodge Jinteki Glacier. I'm gonna dodge any kind of particularly Ag Infusion. Like I guess you're already pretty bad into Ag Infusion. Obviously you generally eat their brands for breakfast, but if they're not on brand and they've decided to like shift over to something like MIC, or if they find all of their sentries, you are normally in quite a lot of trouble. And you also like, if you don't find a marrow, I just don't. Yeah, I don't know. This deck terrifies me. I could not play this deck because it would just scare the living daylights out of me. But yeah, I don't know. Let's have a look here at chat. And yeah, so you've got Palangi, totally. Like, Palangi is sick. I love Palangi, and Palangi is a temporary lamb, kind of like it's a lamb, but it's not a lamb that you can use every single turn. But it only takes up 1 MU, and it allows this like slightly more flexible rig. And I think it's really preying on the fact, as Turtok said, I think, someone just said, it's really preying on the fact that you are gonna hopefully just run. Oh, it's David, sorry. Just hope that you're gonna run into nothing but purple decks all day. Because if you run into like Asas and PDs and things like that, then yeah, you probably smash it out with this. If you're running into like Iceless R+, or Iceless NEH or Ice Light R+, then you probably smash it out with this. And I guess that's just the kind of meta call which you can make and go like, I'm gonna focus on those matchups. Jinteki Glacier isn't real, can't hurt me. Which is hilarious because it was playing like not a Jinteki Glacier deck, but it was playing PE. So very, very funny. Essentially, I was able to beat this Esser with our Asa deck in our round 11, but it was close. Yeah, well, we'll talk about your Asa deck in a minute, and it does have some nice. Well, it's kind of actually, now I think about it. Anyway, we'll get onto that. But yeah, and you are right. It does have like an absolute ton of draw, because Esser is draw herself. It's got free moshing. It's got free running hot, which is like an Esser draw plus like you can click draw, like free nukers. You can find the stuff that you need, but I just don't know like what happens if you open up with like a Begamot and a Buzzsaw in hand or something, and you're just gonna have to throw both of them out. I guess you just throw both of them out and laborites them back, but I don't know. I couldn't play this deck, but I often can't play Tuno's decks, so there we go. And then this absolute beauty, Arazan brought this Arasana to Worlds and won Worlds with this Arasana. This is just absolutely phenomenal. Let's talk about it. Firstly, 50 cards, because you just have a load of cards which you want. I would love to play Spree in my Arasana decks, but I can't fit it in. I could fit it in if I just added them in. It plays this really, really fluid kind of program suite. The only additional MU in this entire deck is 2 copies of Anikam. This isn't on Lilypad. There's no DZMZ, and it runs 15 programs. Now, most of this is very fluid. We've got fermenters, which come and go. We've got like a single coalescence, which comes and very quickly goes. Muses are like flickering in and out. And then even all of our like icebreakers, Euler, Gauss, Propeller, they aren't planned to stick around for very long. This isn't Aesops, but we're on spec work because we're an Anikam deck. So like spec works makes a lot more sense. And watching Arazan in the finals, like the whole deck is just interested in having just enough stuff to like be able to always run and always get in. And it's so cool for that reason. It focuses very heavily on being able to deep dive. 3 copies of deep dive, which is like pretty significant. We see, I think this is the only deck in the top cut. It is, in fact, I know it's the only deck in top cut that's running 3 copies of Deep Dive. We also see like 2 copies of Burner, and both like Arazan and Timmy Wong brought Burner as a big like tech card, and I think it worked out very well for him. Here, because we're Annie Cam, we're like playing things like Pinhole. Obviously, a lot of this is just good stuff like Trick Shot, Creative Commission, Sure Gamble, and then obviously the most important card in the deck in terms of like grabbing everyone's attention, 2 copies Spree. And I just love this because like Spree means that you can play a bunch of Trojans in an Arasana deck which you wouldn't normally be interested in playing. Botulus is normally not the greatest thing in an Arasana deck. It's actually now better than it was because of Muse. So it's still technically worth something, but when you can move it around during a run, then Botulus becomes so good because it doesn't lose the counters. So if you get a Botulus down early and then you just start ticking it up, and then all of a sudden you like Spree R&D and you've got enough counters to just break all the ice. You can move around your Entanglers, which is great, especially if you've got like, if you've got like a remote with 3 fun houses on, and there was a lot of R+ around, or something like that, you can spree through that remote for 3 credits, right? And no tags. That's disgusting. Notably, we've got like a single copy of Coalescence. As Turtok mentions, like in the finals, a very, very common thing was you just saw Arazan flicker the Coalescence with the symbol chip just to get a bit more money. Like, just so they always had enough money to just have the tempo to keep moving. Essentially mentioning moving around the Pikachu to get like ridiculous deep dives. This is why this deck is playing 3 copies of Deep Dive, because you can quite often have these like bonkers turns where you set up the Pikachu like of the turn before. So you've put this is the best way of getting like insane value is you're like maybe make a run somewhere, you install the Pikachu with Arasana. Then the next turn you spree somewhere, like moving the Pikachu to the ice that you're going through, you gain a click, you move it onto the next ice, you go through that ice, you gain another click, you move it back to your hand, you then run somewhere else, you put it back out with Arasani, you gain another click, it comes back to your hand. All of a sudden, you've got like a ton of clicks. If you've got Simmel chips going around as well, then you could muse for another, like put it onto another piece of ice. You can have like just the absolute insane number of clicks, and then like quite like handily get off like a double clipped Deep Dive without like too many issues. Meteor, I like how the deck has none of a Shaper Infinite Econ except for Cole. Yeah, this is like really, I mean, it's got a single Coalescence. I don't know if you can call that. I don't know if you can say except that. This is very much like I'm gonna play my Econ and it's gonna run out. Obviously, there's a DJ Fenris. We do have access to Steve if we want it, like we saw in the finals. You can do other things. I'm a real big fan, especially when I'm playing Breaker Suites like this, of DJ Quetzal, because it means that you don't use up things like your propeller counters. You don't have to get out a Gauss to deal with like the little barriers. And you can sometimes deal with big barriers really well. You can turn into DJ Sable, obviously. We've got 3 deep dives. DJ Sable, pretty good. So this is actually like an incredibly flexible card in this particular deck. And I think it really is like it's at its best in deep dive Arasana, because you have a lot of potential targets. The no telework, nope. Like a couple of casts, a couple of environmental testings, because these still pop up pretty quick with all of the stuff that we've got going on. And I think telework is way too slow for what Arazan wants to do with this deck. Like, it's always wants to be interacting, and telework is like slow econ. Like, it's consistent, but you know, if you could just be like running somewhere with a trick shot instead, do that. This is incredible. I love this deck. I love even more the fact that it won Worlds. I love the fact that Arazan's been like just absolutely dedicated to making this work, and I'm super happy because like we've seen a lot of value piles win Worlds recently. It's good to have something like that's very much on the left like wing taking a spot. Right, let's look at. So, like I said, I'm not interested in lat decks. Sorry, lat players. It's very good. It's incredibly strong. It's very boring. I'm also not interested in the Hishiko Ice Destruction decks because they're also kind of doing the same thing, and I don't really need to. I don't think I need to go through them. Where it starts to get interesting again is when we get into the Corp decks. So, first off, we have the Asa decks. Now, I've done a separate screen to do this in because what I want to be able to do is get like 2 decks up on screen at the same time. So I'm going to move over to this screen. Okay, fine. This was just my testing. We're not actually looking at these decks themselves. And then I'm going to pull up these 2 screens, and hopefully now I should be able to go here. I should have brought up Nightcry. I haven't copied across Nightcry's deck. I do feel bad about that because I just don't think I had too much to say about it. It was Sable. It was like good Sable with twinning, right? But we will talk about Nightcry's Asa deck. So here, if I bring up on this side, so there's a few things. Oh no, I didn't mean to move it. Hopefully, have I moved that back into the right place? We'll find out. I think that's right. Disaster all round. Right, trying to like work out where I'm putting chat and everything. So, what you can do, the reason why I've moved one of the reasons why I've moved these all across, is that what you can do, which is pretty nice in Netrunner DB, is that you can select a bunch of decks. So this is all of the Asa decks from Worlds. Okay, we've got Jais, Sebks, Tak, Centralings, and Night Rides. And then you can go to with selection up here, and you can go compare 2 or more decks, and you can see which cards, hopefully this is showing properly. Yes, it is. You can see which cards are in like all the decks. So we can see that everyone decided that obviously everyone had an Asa. Everyone decided that Ablative Barrier was a very good ice to be playing right now. Everyone was playing at least one brand, but only one. Free Drafter. Everyone's on Drafter. Unsurprising. Fully Op. Unsurprising. And 2 Gatekeepers. Also unsurprising. Everyone had settled that at least one Hagen was the correct call, which I really quite like. I think Hagen's like when you're expecting Turtle, and I would be expecting Turtle from 419s and from Hishiko's, then Hagen makes a lot of sense. And then the the agenda suites were actually quite similar, but there are some changes. But everyone had decided that 2 Ikawa projects, obviously 1 Luminal, and every single person was on Vitruvius in the top cut, which I think makes a lot of sense based on the decks that we're going to see. We had at least 1 Mavirus in each of them. All of them were on Rashidas and Spin Doctors. Every single one was on at least 1 Tattoo Bowler. We are indeed, Lucille. Good to see you. and every single one was on at least one the powers that be, which means with 5, it's only 5 actually. It's not 75%, is it? It's like 25% of the top cut. Okay, I won't bring that back up then. But we also had wage workers in each of the decks. So like that, I think is a really interesting. Like if you wanted to like get right now, go and build yourself an Asa deck, and you wanted it to be a really good Asa deck, that is an incredible starting. Like just start with that set of cards and work out from there, because that's your baseline. And I think that's a really, really useful feature, which like is kind of not like that obvious. Meteor, 3 of them are on the same Asa list? Not quite. 3 of them are on similar Asa lists, but none of them are identical, as from what I could tell. But what we can split it into is like essentially 2 different groups. Okay, so you've got Jai and Seb K, who are on very, very similar lists, which we'll look at in a second. And then we've got Tak, Senchling, and Night Ride. And this is the deck which I'm less familiar with because I've seen Jai's a lot. But let's bring up Senchlings as the like comparative study here. So we can bring that up on this side. And then we can have a little look at the other 2 on this side. So here we have it compared to Tak. Now, there's a couple of big differences here from Jai's build, which we'll have a look in a second. One of them is 3 copies of MCA. MCA austerity policy, and I have a funny feeling that this is what was making these decks tick so much, along with a few other things in these particular ones that we are essentially Matt, I think so too. I think it's really interesting to compare them, but a lot of what these decks are doing is looking at ways of taxing clicks, and I think that is incredibly wise right now when you're considering that probably the strongest runner deck in the format is Deep Dive Lat. There's also other like deep dive decks out there, but what you're going to be worried about is like, I don't want to get deep dived by Lat. So what's the best thing to do? Stop them deep diving you, or at least stop them being able to steal 5 points of agendas off a single deep dive. So let's rob all the possible clicks we can. And this is why we see 3 copies of MCA austerity policy. This is protection against deep dive and also a way of scoring out fast advancing. Essentially saying they spent a lot of time in this deck and there's still a few variations. Obviously, there's always going to be, you're always going to have those little things which you're like, I prefer 1 extra of these, 1 of those. And you'll see them as we just compare the few of them. But all 3 of them are on 3 copies of MCA austerity policy. In fact, we can bring this up. The best way of doing this actually is just to look at these 3 decks. The only thing about this is it's like slightly harder to see the actual deck. So these are the cards in all of these decks. Ablative Barrier, 1 active policing. I did call that someone would bring an active policing deck to Worlds and it would do well. 3 people did, and they did well. All of them obviously have an Audacity. We've got this really nice like closer of a way of closing out the game. And then this is a really interesting card to me. All of them are running 2 copies of Pulse. And I think, I was going to say only one of them, Senchlings, is on an MIC as well, which I was kind of surprised that didn't turn up in the others. But we've got all of these like click taxing options. I'm going to go back to the other view just because it's actually easier to see the decks themselves. So we've got all of these like click taxing options like Ikawa Project, that like deals with clicks. MCA, that takes away clicks. We've got active policing, that can rob you of clicks. Pulse robs you of clicks. MIC robs you of clicks. And really importantly, I guess the big difference here, and I think why Pulse is like, I mean, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong here, Centraling, but Pulse makes big sense over MIC when you're worried about like ice destruction as a problem, right? Because MIC is expensive to res. 6 credits is a lot if that's immediately going to just die to a crew. And you'd have to res it and then expend it immediately to like rob the click that you want to do. Whereas Pulse, you just res it when it's relevant, and then if they destroy it with a crew, then it's gone. You don't really care. It's done its job. It's robbed that click for that one turn. So I really, really like that. Which is nice. But yeah, we've got lots and lots of click robbing options. Obviously, also things like Managarm Skunk Works is really good when you're already like taking some clicks away. And then just doing a kind of classic Asa thing of like, I'm going to spam out like a lot of different servers. And if you run them to check one, I might like res a pulse on you and like wipe out half your turn just checking one server. It might be a Tattoo Bowler, which if you want to get through it, I'm just going to get value from. And yeah, again, so making Ikawa unstealable or very nearly unstealable on a key turn is like really important. Because any time when you're like close to winning, or you've scored 4 points and you can do install advance an Ikawa and then active policing to put either a pulse or an MIC in front of the Ikawa, it's really hard to steal that Ikawa. Like really, really hard. You need to have a Hana down, or you need to have like a Pikachu, or you need to be on Swift. And that's really nice. So, essentially pointing out that like in closed deck lists, you run with 1 click left. Like you run with a spare click because you know you're going to need a spare click to steal the Ikawa. And suddenly, if you're like, it's a pulse, what do you do? You're like, oh. And exactly this point is why I really like the Imp in Timmy Wong's deck, right? Because that's a great way to deal with it. But other than that, we've got like little changes in terms of like we've got more tattoos over cohorts in some, and I think the other change was in Night Rides. I can't remember. I saw it. I think it wasn't. No, it wasn't an extra seamless. Oh, it was no Trank Grid. It was like this one's on Nico's, and Centraling's was on Trank Grid. I prefer Trank Grid myself, but that's personal preference. I really like the like I res an ablative barrier, I get a Trank Grid on your turn type nonsense, which feels pretty good. But yeah, this deck, I think in the various versions of this deck, just look really, really fun and just feel like a really good answer to Deep Dive Lat. So we've got those 3, but also doing very well at Worlds, we had Jai and Seb K, both on very similar versions to Jai's list from earlier in the year. So this is a list which is just trying to jam out very, very fast using a combo of the powers that be and the Hollow Man, and sometimes wage workers, to get this like very fast, speedy, like almost like a train of agendas and other threats going in and out of a remote very, very fast. I think the only differences here is that Jai was on a single Christian grid, which I really like, and we saw a lot of Christian grid. We saw a lot of single Christian grid splashes, And again, if you're expecting a lot of like deep dive lat and a load of other things which just have good run events, Christian Grid feels like a real good option, especially when you're on 3 copies of Ablative Barrier, because like there's nothing worse than running HQ, like trashing the Christian Grid, running R&D, rezzing an Ablative Barrier, and just putting the Christian Grid right back on HQ, or somewhere else, or on archives. Yeah, Meteor, I get you on that. Meteor says it reminds him a lot of how Facet Odd plays. And it is this like, I'm going to set up a remote. It's not going to be like super taxing. It'll probably have 1 big bit of ice and like 1 cheap bit of ice. And then I'm just going to jam in it every single turn really, really fast. Sentient saying, Jai's Chrysium Grid denied my deep dive a couple of times in our games, and exactly Ablative Barrier bring it back to Chrysium was like there's nothing more depressing, especially when this is 5 to trash. That's a lot. You can't use Parisia for this. You have to either like this like 2 of these eat up a bones. Like that's your bones gone, and you probably need like bones credits for other things if you're on a bones. If you're on a Parisia, you've got no way of dealing with this Chrysium apart from just the cold hard cash. Like hopefully you've got an overclock or something. Saving copulation for it would have been nice. Yeah, that's the best way of dealing with it, especially as it's a one-off. But both these lists fairly similar other than that, and can go insanely fast if a remote is left like unchecked for too long. Jai sneaking in a second biotic, which is a really nice closer. We've seen that even though like Lat is, Shaper is so popular right now, the amount of clot is very low, and it's because Shapers need their symbol chips for other stuff. I'm not playing clot in Arasana because I want my symbol chips to be able to do nonsense. If I need to have keep a symbol chip hanging around because I've got a clot somewhere, like it doesn't fit my game plan, like it doesn't fit my game style very well. And I can just see everyone else having very similar. So having extra biotic labors, so that you can either fast advance out a Vitruvius or a Luminal, both pretty good. But you can also fast advance out an off-world office using a wage workers. You can even fast advance out an Ikawa project using a Hollow Man and a wage workers. It's pretty expensive. But yeah, you can do some pretty cool stuff here. Hey Dijen, very nice to see you. Yeah, the double biotic term was like pretty nuts. And I have lost to Nikki 3.0 from my local meta, playing like a double biotic turn before. Because I was like, there's no way he can score out. He did. Of note, in the top 16, there's no clot and no hush. Yeah, which is wild because there's 1 Arasana in the top 16, right? But no hush. It doesn't really fit that particular deck. Okay. Asa did really well at Worlds. Asa's a good pick right now. We've got 2 very significant and different builds here. I'm sure Centraling's build is going to see a lot of play because we haven't seen this, this hasn't been published previously, so I think a lot of people will be really keen to try this out. The Audacity is a super nice touch as a way of closing out on surprisingly low credits. The other deck which did really well at Worlds, which maybe some people saw coming but maybe not, was R+. And these decks, I don't know if I've actually looked through these properly yet, but I believe they're all quite different. But maybe I've saved that and I've just opened up 2 which are very, very similar. No, there's enough differences here. So, Lucille, I would absolutely imagine Oh yes, sorry, of course. Seb K was on Arasana as well. I don't think I pulled over Seb's runner list. That feels bad. We could pull that over in a second. Yeah, Lucille, I would expect just a pile of miserable NBN at UK Nats, but that's just the UK. No, you are not all misremembering. I am misremembering. Okay, CTZ, NBN, Reality Plus, playing active policing. I think this is like a very, very strong card in a very strong card in NBN, and it's proven to be pretty strong. It's like it does a thing which kind of no other card does, which is just rob 2 clicks for 1 click, which is really, really significant. So we've got 3 R plus builds. These two are somewhat similar. I didn't like that comparison, Lucille. Like, we can try that, but it doesn't bring them up like this. Like, it shows them in a list. We can see them like this. Compare. What are you saying? Compared to... Yeah, that's what I brought up earlier. That's what I was doing earlier. But then you can't see it split into, like, categories. So it's, like, really useful for just seeing, like, this is what's in all the R plus decks. And we can see that, for instance, all the R plus decks were playing 3 copies of Behold. This card is terrifying in R plus, especially when you potentially only need like 1 tag. Degree Mill is not comparable to Orbital Superiority, I don't think, Diogene, because it's a 5-3 compared to a 4-2. Like, Orbital is really, really good, and we see it in at least one of these decks, but you need to make up your agenda points, and you need some 5-3s to do that, otherwise your deck just bleeds out too fast. And yeah, people realizing that Behold is pretty unfair, and it really, really is. All of these decks were on end of a line, and all of them were on multiple end of the lines. All of these decks were on false lead, and I think this is where like we really see like the like, particularly where Behold is real good, because you can almost never run if there's a false lead scored. You can't run anywhere unless the corp is on less than 4 credits and not potentially end up with a tag. Like, there's no point in the turn unless you have a Hannah Wheels down or some other, like, or NFL or something, that you can run and not end up with a tag. All of them were on Mindscape as well, so we've got ways of getting the kill once there's multiple tags down. Obviously, we see Oppo Research, Pings, Rashidas, Regolith Mining License, really common splash here, and I think you just need like a lot of dense money. These decks do not have a lot of slots that they can give up with stuff. And then all of them are playing some number of Hollow Men, Savernas, Virtual Service Agents, and YDLs. And like, even I think the other thing is like a lot of runners currently, especially Lat, doesn't have money to clear tags. Like Lat, most of the builds have loads of money to spend on runs, but once the run's over, they're normally like kind of poor. We've seen a few more of the Lats kind of revert back to having Fermenter as an option, and I think that's actually a really, really good call. Like, that's why you're not splashing Clock, because you're like, you kind of want some form of really good solid economy, and Fermenter is it. So we see this. Let's pull these up a little bit more. So these two, Passive Malts and CTZs, and then we also had Arazans as well. And I think Arazans and passive malts are the most similar. Yeah. So these two, we could have a look at these, and then we could look at CTZs, because CTZ's just built different in terms of the way he builds decks. So very, very similar with a couple of differences in terms of splashes. We've got the same, not quite the same actually, agenda suite. So there's a second Oracle think tank over here in passive malts, and we've got 3 copies of Beal in Arazans and only 2 degree mills, right? So we've got more like fast advance options in Arazans, and passive malts is a bit more kind of determined to like never advance out one of these degree mills, I think, with a Hollow Man if you're looking to threaten for win via score. Then we got Beholds and Gaslights. Arazan, I know, added in the Lady Liberty, I think, which is like a very rude way of scoring a false lead. As he mentions in like the post interview, like, okay, this costs a couple more credits than just scoring the false lead if you just put the false lead in the server. But now they've got to come and trash his Lady Liberty, and then they open themselves up to being oppoed when you have a false lead scored. And yeah, it also means that the agenda suite makes a bit more sense, having a few more 2-pointers once you've got this Lady Liberty up. Preferably next turn you want to be able to score some, like to pull the next agenda in, so that you're like, hey, if you don't come and deal with this, then like maybe I just add a degree mill to my score area next turn. Passive Malt had a cheeky snare to go along with his 3 copies of Behold. Very rude. And definitely could catch people out. And then, whereas Arazan was spending that money on Pivot, which I think is quite nice. Like, this is a good way. We've got 2 ways, in fact, Gaslight and Pivot, of finding our like tag punishment when we want the tag punishment, which is pretty important, especially in decks where you might be playing against burners and imps and things like that. And then both players settled on Amaze Amusements as another very unfair card, and I agree here. Like, I think this is basically like Behold. If you're already playing 3 copies of Behold and you're like, this is a really unfair card, so I'm going to play this card, then you should also be playing this. This only costs 1 credit to res, and okay, it's a little more like finicky to deal with because it needs to have an agenda in the same remote. But my word, does this this is a much more unfair card if that goes off, because you haven't had to pay 4 credits for it. And then they see the Amaze, and then like maybe they think about trashing the Amaze as well. Like, I think most of the time the correct thing is to not trash the Amaze. Like, yeah, any card that says 2 tags are pretty unfair. And as soon as you've added in things like false lead, and in CTZ's build, even, like, you know, we've got an active policing. You can go, like, install a false lead. You can even go install a false lead, I don't know, put a ping in front of it, then active policing. Oh, but CTZ wasn't on Amaze Amusements. Okay, so we can't do it there. Cupping Amaze is very fun, that is true. Because I think that completely turns it off because it's uninstalled, right? So it would like stop the persistent trigger. I think that's correct. Very rude. But yeah, so all of these decks were doing a fairly similar thing. Obviously, CTZ coming at it from a slightly different angle because he's spending his influence on active policing. Also a single copy of Public Trail, which I don't think we see in either of the other decks. Which is definitely going to catch some people out. Like, you can always catch people out with Public Trail into End of the Line. In fact, I think XDG knocked Whiteblade into the lower bracket in the cut turn 2 with a Public Trail into Predictive Planogram into End of the Line for the kill. Like, turn 2, just game over. It can happen. And it will happen. And if you're not like playing around that, it's going to happen to you. But yeah, expect to like see a lot of R+ kill decks on JNet for the next little while. Slot your YDLs, add your Hannah Wheels back in, and yeah, I guess like. Maybe even better than your digital life. Like, it might be the time to start putting... What's the virtual resource? The criminal virtual resource, which is like 0 and starts to trace. It might be time to put that back in. Once they score for false leads, it's just game over? Very possibly. And like the other thing is that, again, so these are more decks which have potential click taxing issues, right? We've got 3 copies of false lead. Now, you don't really want to use one of those to stop a deep dive, but you could do. Like, you do have this like backup protection that your win condition could also become your like I'm not going to lose condition right now. And it's quite hard to sometimes deep dive against these decks because especially if you haven't like pre-forced the ping reses and things like that. If you haven't got a way to deal with virtual service agents, or if you take a tag off the Unsmiling Serevna because you don't want to lose your deep dive to the damage, or you hit a Behold, like, it's quite hard to run all 3 centrals, not end up with any tags at all. And then, like, at that point, you could deep dive, but if you have a tag, like, what if you don't win? If you don't win on that deep dive, you might have just lost. Free stone chips. Yeah, free stone chip is not a bad shout right now. Like, you probably need, like, I'm just trying to work out the maths of like double End of the Line. Like, you definitely need to be like safe to 6 damage so you can deal with Mindscaping End of the Line. I think you need to steal 3 to 4 points from quick shot. Yeah, absolutely. Like you only ever, against these type of decks, you never want to go for an early deep dive or anything like that. You wait until you are like guaranteed to win pretty much. You want 3 to 4 points minimum. Okay. We need to get a crack on here. We've got a few more decks to get through. So, the other deck which did really well, we had the Ag Infusions. Let me make sure I've not got these ones here. So, let's see what makes a good Ag Infusion list. Select all of these. So, in all of the... Wow, how wild is that? That can't be correct. No, something's up there. I've got something weird. Okay, right, there we go. Let's try again. That's better. Okay. Yeah, you can always, like, you basically wait for the turn where you've gone tag me, as long as they don't have a false lead scored, and then you go for it. So, all of these Ag Infusion decks had an Ag Infusion. They all had at least 1 copy of Anansi. I think it's Rubens, which only had 1 copy. Most of them were on more. All of them decided that Anoetic Void was the correct option for the like defensive upgrade. We all have at least 2 Bacterials. I think all of them had 3 apart from Timmy Wong's, which was just on 2. 3 copies of Bran, features in every single one of them. It is still a very good card. It's nutty good in Ag Infusion. Obviously, we've got 3 Charlotte Cassadors. All of them are on hedge funds and Hansai grids. And again, all of them apart from one are on Lacosta grid. And again, it's Timmy Wong's deck, which is just on 2 Lacosta grids. We've got Rashidas and full set of Sai Sentans everywhere. This is why I'm like terrified about playing Tuno's deck. Spin Doctors, all of them have at least 1 Subliminal. I think most of them have 2. And all of them are on 3 copies of Tattoo Bowler, which is not a surprise. But compared to like the other decks, these ones maybe have the most differences. So I think these are like less easy to look at comparatively, but we might be able to do that. Santa's is most similar from what I remember. I think it's to Ruben's. From how I worked this out. Maybe that's correct. So we can kind of look at 2 and then, or maybe it was this and no, Timmy's is like so off to the left in a fantastic way. So Santa's and Ruben's are like somewhat similar. We've got exactly the same agenda suite. This is like the soccer agenda suite, I'd call it. We've got the same assets with 3, 3, and 3 for the Charlottes, Rashidas, Spin Doctors. We've got mostly the same. Thank you for everyone who pointed out it's No One Home. No One Home is correct. We got mostly the same econ. So Hands Eyes, Hedge Funds, 2 Subliminals. Santa is also playing a couple of copies of Sprint. Like Santa's list is very similar to Soccer's list essentially. Then Santa has found space for a Mavirus, which I think he's the only person playing a Mavirus, and that's like pretty interesting. Like Mavirus is a good card right now, but it is hard for Ag Infusion to find slots for it. 3 Lacostras and 2 Anoetics, and we have 3 Lacostras and 2 Anoetics on Ruben's side, but also a pretty cheeky single copy of the Hollow Man, which just adds to the scoring potential that this deck has. We don't have any way of fast advancing with this, but being able to like suddenly like rip out a 5/3 agenda, like 1 click into a turn and then jam is like kind of nuts. Actually, I didn't hear that. No, it's interesting. Maybe send me a link to the deck. And then the main difference here is the influence spend in the ice. So Santa's stuck with like, I'm just going to tax your clicks wherever I can. So has gone for border controls, which makes a lot of sense. They feel a little bit rough into crew matchups, but like you potentially in those matchups, you just res them and pop them immediately when it's correct. So this is going just for the like, I'm gonna like make you have to run the remote 4 or 5 times, and deal with like a brand 4 or 5 times. Ruben went with tree lines and MICs, and I know this got like a pretty spicy reaction on stream. I know that this was kind of like an anti-crew, not anti-crew, but it's annoying for the crew decks to deal with. Like a single one is either like a couple of leech tokens or like spending a a devil charm and a crew to get through it, or it gets botchless and uses up botchless. And then if you tree line for tree line, then all of a sudden it becomes even hard. Like then you're like spending a whole devil charm to get rid of it, plus a leech counter or plus the tag. And yeah, this was like Ruben and I think also the King, like pretty good. And yeah, good into reg lats as well, because getting a tree line, especially getting a tree line past 8 strength, like it's not the easiest thing to do, but you can do it. especially in Ruben's deck here, where you can use the Hollow Man if you need to. Like all of a sudden, like Propeller can't deal with this ice anymore. Like just can't get through it. So you need to use other ways to deal with it. And then also an MIC, which I really, really like. When I saw the MIC, I actually assumed that Ruben was going to be on. Oh yeah. Sorry, my mistake. Yeah, Augustus was also on Tree Lines. Advance it to beat propellers without turbine. That's it. Like you get it to a point where, like, and even just like a single advancement on a tree line gets it to strength 5, which is enough to really annoy a propeller. Propeller wants like stuff with strength 4 is fine. It can like get through it twice. Strength 5 is really annoying to deal with propeller. How you doing, Augie, as well? Nice to see you in chat. And then the MIC, which I really, really like. When I saw the MIC, I assumed that Ruben was going to be on a single Sisyphus, but he's not. We only had one Sisyphus Sicko here. However, very interestingly, 2 copies of Sadaka, which is like pretty spicy, really, really good on HQ to deny Steve triggers, and also like has to be got rid of like instantly in any like crew matchups as well. Really, really nice. And this is where like the MIC and the Sadaka mean that Ruben can't play like 3 copies of Anansi. And he's also won 2 copies of Vampira Nasa, whereas Santa was just on Thimble Rigs. We then move on to the sickest man in Netrunner, the King, who was playing a single copy, like very different agenda suite here. So we've just got 5 frees, Bacterial and Send a Message, and then 1 copy of Sisyphus Protocol, which if you ever score this thing out, is disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. Sisyphus Protocol means that you want to play a very slightly different agenda suite, and this is why we have MIC and Vampira Nasa here. Going through a Vampira Nasa twice, if your rig is anything other than Turbine plus Buzzsaw, is horrendous. Like, just absolutely backbreaking. And the King, playing 2 copies of Cloud Eater. Big Snake did well. I need to get some stories off Brandon of like whether the Big Snake did Big Snake things, but he did very well in the tournament. I'm sure, especially during Swiss, this probably came as a bit of a surprise to more than one person. Even like I probably don't have to point out the fact that if you score a Sisyphus and then they run through a freshly rezzed Cloud Eater, they're probably coming away with about 8 tags, which we don't have any tag punishment here, but say goodbye to all of your resources after that. And then finally, we had Timmy Wong's. So different, like we've got as opposed to the 3 Bacterials, we're playing like just 2 Bacterials, and then so we're playing an extra agenda or an extra 2 agendas if you compare it to the King. But Off-World's Niseis both like very, very good, and then we've also got a single copy of Timey Public Release, which is kind of interesting, bearing in mind that there's no border controls here. Now, absolutely still makes sense. Like, you're always going to have ice in the bin as Ag Infusion, and sometimes just being able to like magic an ice from nowhere, especially if you're like about to get deep dived and you're like, I'm just going to put an ice on archives so that I can boop you all of a sudden. It's going to feel very, very good. But I'd love to know like how often, like if this was scored out and what it did if so. Like, really, really cool. One psychographics as a cheeky include would be like really, really fun. But yeah, kind of somewhat unnecessary. At that point, like they have a ton of tags. They can't rely on resources anymore, and most decks are relying on at least some resources. What Timmy also has is his deck is like a lot faster than the others, or it's aiming to go a lot faster. So the ice is much lower to the ground. Obviously, we've still got the brands. We've decided they're fantastic. They are. But then our other barrier choice here is Palisade, which I quite like. This is free to res, and Strength 4, which we've just talked about. Strength 4 being like good enough. Better if it's Strength 5. Can be Strength 5. We do have a copy of Rhyme. But cheap to res, importantly. Tattoo Bowlers, which are cheap / negative money to res. We've got Gatekeepers, which are cheap to res and very hard to break on that turn. Rhyme and Sadaka, we like both cheap and do stuff potentially. And then 3 copies of Saisentan, and then our only other big ice is a Nancy. And then on top of the like cheaper ice, we've got 2 copies of Seamless Launch. So this deck is like far more rushy, like really looking to jam out those 4/2s and probably score like 4 4/2s as opposed to 2 4/2s and 1 5/3. If the Bacterial comes up, then you definitely look to score that, and you can do that like quite quickly using Lacosta plus Seamless Launch. And I'm guessing the 2 copies of Seamless Launch is why Timmy also feels far more comfortable just having 2 copies of Lacosta. And all of these 4/2s is pretty nice in a deck with Charlotte Castador, because you can just go install advance, like do something else, add another piece of ice, pass a turn, and like, is it a 4/2? Is it a Charlotte? Could be either right now, and you kind of have to run it whichever way it is. So it feels pretty good. And then the last of the Corp decks from Worlds, or that I'm going to talk about anyway. I did mention I wasn't going to talk about Patrick's. Is why these decks, which is probably why JNet is going to be horrendous to play for the next like 3-4 weeks. I'm going to be putting at least 1 copy of Airblades into my Arasana deck, just for the time being. We've got Deer's version on the left here. We've got Tuno's version on the right, and there are very, very subtle differences. So Tuno's has a copy of Fully Operational, whereas D's has a copy of Tranquility and a Chrysium Grid, which we've already kind of talked about. And there's a little bit more. We've got a couple of Hands Eye reviews on Tuno's side as well. Other than that, the ice suites are very nearly identical. We've got 2 copies of Data Loop, very rude. 3 copies of Vampirinasa, and Vampirinasa we've already talked about is like kind of hard. Like, people are off Buzzsaw Turbine right now, so it's suddenly very hard to break. Which is interestingly, I think, why some of the decks which did the best on the runner side are ones which had decided that I'm going to slot an Oiler. Because all of a sudden I break Vampirinasa for like either 3 or for 2 credits. And then we've got one little swap around with like 2 anemones on Deer's side, whereas Tuno was on Saisentan and an anemone. The best way of seeing how this deck works is just to watch the finals, because it's a hell of a game. I think Turtok, yes, it is poor as hell without the Pranas, but PE is always poor as hell, right? Like, and if you get a Prana going, like, they are, like, the money that you make off a Prana is insane, if you can really get these going. The money that it does have, like, it obviously it has Tattoo Bowler. If you can, like, trash or hush a Tattoo Bowler as opposed to passing it, then you're probably doing pretty well. There's the cohorts, which if they stick around, they're money. There's the Trank Grid. There's a single hedge fund. And then like the Rashidas. But yeah, you really, really want to stick a Prana at some point for this to work. Especially if you're planning on rezzing any of these like Vampirinasas or Anansis. Or the Data Loop. I mean, you say that, Diogene. Deer came second. So I think it must work. The deck must work. Both of the both Tudo and Deer made top cut. And I do not think that this is an easy deck to play. It looks very hard to play. It looks about really knowing where and when you're going to push. Finding the right spot to like score a Regenesis with a Fuji is probably pretty key, because you definitely can't put out 7 points like without a Regenesis score, I don't think. Obviously, you're also fishing for kills, so this deck definitely has like a couple of, like, it has two very separate lines of winning, but they are tied together. You're going to be constantly putting pressure on the runner by like, I'm going to score out if you don't do anything. The runner can't just dirtle around and not like react to you, because Regenesis into Fuji is like a massive hit. Yeah, Crims, like I don't know how it deals with Crim. I don't know how it deals, especially like 4-9. No idea. Like, I just imagine it falls over, but maybe that was just a really good meta call. There wasn't a huge amount of Crim. And you might have just dodged it, and you might be okay in Swiss. Again, like in Swiss, it's really hard to know what a PE deck is doing until the last, like, until sometimes it's maybe a bit too late. And yeah, I think this deck looks like kind of disgusting, but in a sort of good way. But I'm definitely going to put just a little bit of net damage protection in my decks, just for the time being. Right, that is like, I'm gutted I didn't port over Seb's Arasana deck actually, because it is super fun. Maybe I can very quickly pull it over now, because it's not what most people would be expecting, I don't think. Let's just grab it. I'll grab it from this list here. We'll talk about that. I'll plug my laptop in before it dies, and then I'm going to play like one game with Timmy Wong's deck, because I think it's kind of nuts. Obviously, I want to play Arazan's deck, but I think I'm going to save that for a stream where I can just play Arazan's deck. Let's import this one so that we can see it better. Seb K Worlds Ari, import, save. Okay, here we go. So this is Seb's Arasana. For balance, we can pull it up next to Arazan's, even though they're like absolutely wildly different. Where is it? Nearer the top. There we go. So this is Seb's Arasana. Now, I know that Seb took like my kick flippy Q loop bullshit. Yeah, maybe actually. I've got 21% remaining. Apparently 26 minutes, but I don't believe that. That's 26 minutes if I'm not streaming. So time's ticking down. I know Seb took my like Q loop Arasana to World Showdown, as did XGG. Neither of them got on with the deck. I felt slightly bad about that, because I was like, look how great this deck's doing right now. Apparently not for other people. But Seb did enjoy playing Arasana, loves a bit of Arasana, and so like basically just went back to playing like his Arasana deck from before RWR came out. Was jamming that for quite a while. Like I was spectating his games, going, Seb, where the hell are all your trick shots? And he's like, oh, it's an old list. And I'm like, okay, that's fine, but put the trick shots in. And then I think I don't think this is much different actually. I think this like the only thing that is in from the new set is the trick shots. I think this is it. So it's 2 diversion of funds. Seb also on Euler, as we've mentioned, like a very good choice. We're on Turbine, with a kind of fairly like Shaper standard breaker suite, but we obviously also have the Salem. So I guess that's a new card. Obviously, if you're playing Arasana and not playing for Salem, then I don't know what you're doing. No deep dive here though. So maybe I made a incorrect statement earlier. Not everyone was on deep dive. Seb was the only deck which wasn't on, only Shaper deck that wasn't on at least one deep dive. Choosing to go for Conduit, which is why we've got the Pikachu here. You'd think Pikachu must be a deep dive deck, but Seb just wants to like make running R&D like 5 times in a turn doable. And then the rest of the deck is like kind of pretty classic, like lily pads, urban art, environmental testing, get an engine going. No like coalescence, no Aesops, any of that. It's much kind of quicker, and definitely preys on some people by suddenly going click 1 diversion of funds, or click 1 and 2, because you can almost always get in with Arasana. There are no muses here, which again is like a choice. I'd have maybe gone like some number of SMC, some number of muse, maybe 1 less Kaiban, but there we go. This definitely is going to like catch some people out in a big way, because just Doof out of faction, especially like Doof, you kind of expect it if you see crew Hashiko nowadays, as long as you don't start seeing like a ton of copullations. But you see it in Shaper, you're like, I was not expecting that. Notably, no Hush. And I think right now, like if people are going to be like, I'm just going to play Soccer's List from Worlds, you probably want a Hush. It is really, really good. But, you know, you haven't got the influence. If you're spending 10 influence on diversion of funds, like Seb hasn't even got a DJ in here. There's no like late game recursion. This is just going to go fast enough and put enough pressure on the corp. Like, the free Kaiyabans does make a lot of sense when you're just trying to put pressure on, because you're just going to run everywhere, put a Kaiyaban on a piece of ice and say, are you going to res it? Because if not, I'm going to farm it. Super cool. Right, I have 17% battery left. My laptop is plugged in apparently, but maybe the plug isn't turned on. So give me 2 seconds to do that. I might have to. Okay, yeah, totally. Whatchamacallit, professional. Right, let's move back to my other screen, which is here, and find that screen. So much tension. And I'll throw out one game. I'm going to do one game with like Timmy Wong's deck, just because I think it is like kind of wild and it's kind of fun. and then runner. And then I can, oh, where is it? There we go. And then I can spend a bit more time playing with Arazans at some point. Night Wild Turtok, thanks for dropping by. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, the other thing, I should say about Seb K, like massive shout out to Seb K, because I know he pivoted like very last minute, and I do mean very last minute because I did a test game with him like minutes, or I don't know, minutes before registration, when he wanted to do like one last test of R+. He was going to be playing R+. And pivoted to Asa kind of at the last minute. He was already like considering it. Okay, this is actually a pretty good this is a pretty good like MV RAM choice, because we really want an Anikam there. DJ Fenris is perfect MV RAM fodder. And then we probably do the SMC and the Simul chip, as they are tools that we want to be able to get very quickly. This does not feel like a keep though, so we now mulligan this. Freedown won't be stream sniping. He'd have turned it off, I'm sure. Oh yeah, there we go. Maybe he saw enough. I would assume not. But yeah, so we want to get this Anikam down. Bones in the opening hand is pretty sweet, but we don't have a way of dealing with ice. So we might go gamble Bones face check if Freedom puts down ice. Like, we'd love to, I guess we do have an SMC. So we could go Isla, SMC, gamble, run. I don't love that though. I think I'd rather save. Oh, I was going to say I'd rather save the SMC for a trick shot. I'm definitely going to challenge this. We're going to see what this is. So we'll go. Do we put the bones down? Is the big question. I think we're going to assume we're not going to get in. I'd face check click one, but I want to play the gamble first. So I think we gamble, and then it's either we go bones run or we just run. I think I'm going to go bones run. That's fine. And then we'll get down this daily casts, and then we'll draw some cards next turn. Hopefully drawing into an event. Whoa, Luminal? Whoa. Wow, maybe SMC was the correct call. I'm pretty happy if Freedown wants to res an MIC there. Have we got the fully up? Oh wow. Wow. That's some bounce back. Okay. Could we draw a trick shot? Yeah. Yeah. That seemed like an okay run of turns. Yeah, trick shot would be nice. Or an overclock. Draw. It's like okay, but it's not quite what I want. We could go install. I don't love install. Like, I have to click Isla, install Yannicam, Dirty Laundry without gaining any value doesn't feel brilliant. So I think we draw again. Burner is useless right now. So it might be a case that we put this, like, get this self-modifying code into hand ready. I'm gonna do that. I need to have this like ready to go. So we're just gonna get the SMC down. Unfortunately, we get a Rashida here. Next turn. So we can challenge server 1. This can't be another agenda, right? That would be wild. But it wasn't res. So what is it? Tranquility? Tranquility would make a lot of sense. Because it's really good to put it behind a tattoo bowler. Send it with a burner? We might well send it with a burner this turn. Because we can send it with a burner. Okay, it's not a tranquility. Okay, we don't get good burner value here. So we might check HQ. There's a very slight chance that we Fenris for Quetzal. Like, very slight. I need to get some Anicam draw going here. So I think, as much as it's like painful to do, I'm going to go pull for Anicam, install Anicam, Dirty Laundry HQ. Then we might check server 2 last click. We can steal an Ikawa here if there is one. We'll steal a Vitruvius instead. So what? Oh, that's a really bad draw. That's a really bad draw for us, unfortunately. Because now, if this is just an ablative, we can't get in here. But I think we have to challenge it. Server 2, that is. Like, we can't get into server 1 this click. Because we only have one way of breaking barriers, which is Cleaver. So we can't SMC for anything. If there's a Vitruvius in HQ, then I kind of think that server 1 is probably an agenda. Are you letting us through? Wild. Cohort, we'll trash you. So this could be MCA. Did Freedan have enough clicks to click it last turn? I don't know. But we probably get a decent burner next turn. We'll draw a card off it. Okay, we don't get a decent burner anymore. We'll have to go and clear out that Spin Doctor if we want a burner. Which we could do. We can run server 2, burner HQ, see where we go from there. We'd love to be able to burn a first click because stealing an Ikora is quite hard. I don't know if it's coming across on the microphone, but right now Poppy's hamster is trying to escape from her cage and making a hell of a racket. Oh, well, that could be a problem. Okay, we can go and get an imp, which might be correct here. Thinking. That looks very much like an Ikawa, right? So we have access to imp. We possibly need to put down a symbol chip if we're going to do that. So that if they res... but I can't just go and imp it because I need to get rid of this... The hamster's name is Twinkle Star. I know, right? I have to go and get rid of this Spin Doctor. So we could just put down Cleaver Run. I think we have to challenge the Spin Doctor first, which is upsetting. Because otherwise there's the potential of overinstall. I guess maybe burner first would have been fine. Is it Sven? No, it's Twinkle Star. I did not name it. So now we go Cleaver and assume that we can deal with the Skunkworks after we break whatever this is. If Freedan reses a Skunkworks and something else, you can't score this out. So that's fine. So we could put down a Simul chip. Then I don't think we can afford the Skunkworks under any circumstances. Maybe we can. No. We can't anyway. Oh, that's a problem. Like, genuinely a problem. Maybe we should have burned this turn. I actually need something like an overclock or something here. Let's see what's in here. Well, I think the drafter can go at the bottom. I think Freedan can have the MCA. I mean, he can't flicker the tattoo anymore. Let's give him the MCA. We'll put the Nico on the bottom. Oh, Hannah is good, but one turned like just a second too late. No, I don't want him to have. Okay, putting ice on the top, maybe. I just didn't want Freeland to have the option of like flickering this tattoo with anything. I'm gonna force you to res the Skunkworks. Rip. I know, right? I do like the imp. Okay, do we mad dash the Ikawa for style next turn? Like, it doesn't help us in any way, shape, or form. But we draw a card doing it. So maybe. Like, if there's definitely not a Spin Doctor on board, then I'm going to do it just to draw the card. Could be Spin Doctor. Not a Spin Doctor. So now we can mad dash the Ikawa for style points. Oh, we don't draw. Hilarious. Because the mad dash isn't trashed. That's very funny. Rip. And now we have like no money. That's fine. Okay, well, that's draw for next turn. Do they have a maybe they do have a window to res the skunk after I install the imp. I may. I may have given myself a game loss here. You had a window for the skunk after the imp install. Also, I didn't trash the skunk, and I forgot I had Miss Bones. I also, in return, I didn't trash the skunk, even though I had Bones. So, not quite even, but you know. Gain credit, creative permission. At least we've got good money for next turn, so that's nice. Yeah, I didn't give him. I totally didn't. I thought that I'd passed like that window, but that's not the way it is anymore, is it? With like Skunkworks. Still not a game loss. Sick. Not a game loss. What is it? Like a warning? Am I about to get a warning? Am I being warned? Do I need to go and deal with this? Probably. Seems good. Let's. Do we draw for a trick shot, or do we like we could either like do big draw, or we go like shopping in HQ. Let's just do a single one. Oh, I don't have enough clicks anymore to do like Hannah. I also don't. I forgot to like. Haven't got an SMC. Could be a problem. I'll let Freedan score out there. Yeah. I mean, I would just happily take the game loss at this point. Um, I probably owe Freedan at least that much. Send him. I was gonna say, like, scoring out an Ichor here. Resna Bran feels fine. We're gonna smash HQ with a Dirty Laundry. Do I get Steve out first? Is a big question. Probably not. I don't actually have great targets right now. So let's go HQ. Ablative here is fine. Viarcation over Nuka makes sense potentially in an Anicam build. It is faster. I think Santa and oh, that's interesting. I think I just imp that. I really want to imp. I could leave it until it's in a server. I'm actually going to not do anything. We're going to go back. Yeah, I think Santa and Abraham and Charlie, that's more an impable target. And then I think we're gonna put down the Hannah. Kind of really like Viarcation at the moment. Even just playing it like first click to draw 4, or in this case 5 cards for 2 clicks is like pretty good. Hey Supernaut, how you doing? You've joined us just in time to see that I have managed to get myself a game loss. But we're playing it out anyway. Ooh, hello. Okay. So what do we think that is? if it's an Ikawa, can we steal it? Yes. Well, we have to go and check that. So we'll check it with Hannah. Because the click is clearly important. We have access to SMC, so we can go and get like our Euler if we need to. I have got to remember that there is a single copy of Audacity in this list. So maybe I'm going to get rid of that now. Don't have access to Burner. Maybe I need to go HQ here. It's wherever we get back Steve. Why do I have 3 clicks? Oh, Freeland didn't spend the extra 2. So I could click for Steve, install Steve, make a run on HQ. Doesn't seem great. So what we might do is check HQ. We might flicker the imp here because we have a second simul chip. It's quite rude. Only costs 5. And maybe we just let the first one... Oh, it doesn't actually make a difference. Fine. I'm going to aggressively flicker the imp. We'll get rid of this brand. Install this, hit it for the SMC before I forget, and then VRcation. Oh, I draw more cards than I thought. Okay, the single deep dive, kind of need to keep... I think the telework can go. It might actually be the fermenter. I really want this overclock. Probably want the creative more than the telework. The telework can go. It should probably be fermenter there. It should probably be fermenter. I'm gonna need to find my Takobi if I want to be dealing with all of this nonsense. Okay, what did Freedan do? Drew, gained 1. Fine. So here we can like... Here we could get Steve. So we can pull Steve, install Steve, overclock HQ, getting a Takobi, and then creative commission. Fenris, install Fenris. Have I got enough credits? Don't know. Didn't actually check. I have exactly enough credits, which means I'm actually 1 short in terms of credits. So that's the problem. Balls. Wait, am I too short here? I have mathed this incorrectly. We'll go... So we can either take credit or we can go install Eka, then run it. Kobe. Now we should be able to afford this. Oh, maybe we had enough. Maybe I was wrong. Right, let's find a fully op. Yes, please. We'll choose to bring back. I think it's gamble into gamble, and then we might actually go creative into gamble next turn, will invert. Ooh, burner. Rude. Okay. 3 downs on 1 credit. They can pop back with fully op. They can also just score out using an audacity at any moment, which is terrifying. So I think we go like creative, gamble, and then we either run this remote or we burner. I don't think we burner this turn. So maybe we run the remote. Gamble, run the remote. Yes, please. I'm going to set this to always. The threat of... Oh, now you can res this. Oh, that's upsetting. I did forget about that. Well, at least we can trash the server with Bones money. Yeah, you can go. You can go. The threat of Audacity is actually kind of scary in these decks. Freedan needs no money to have to be able to pull that off. Like, we really need to burner the Audacity. I think we burn a first click next turn. We've got good recursion targets now. Like we can go overclock, which means that we can get into R&D pretty well. We might also have to check this. We haven't drawn a single trick shot yet, which is upsetting. This is like one more credit than I want it to be, but I can't use the Takobi in case of because I need it for the brand. Ooh, Vitruvius on the top. Seems launch Tattoo Bowler. Well, Vitruvius is going to go on the top of R&D. And I think the Seamless Launch can go to the bottom just to make sure that they don't have access to it. Then we should have enough money if we do this into R&D. In fact, can we dirty laundry in? No, we cannot. I don't even need to overclock here, actually. That's probably a waste of overclock. Spin res. GG. It's your game, though. Taking my game loss. Like a responsible adult. The potential audacity is very scary. big respect for the turn one jam. Um, awesome. Well, that was Timmy Wong's deck played to a game loss, but I think like still kind of showed what it does. Like it plays a bit differently to Lat. I actually think Isla is kind of fun here. We have a bunch of like very techie type cards which are really useful in particular situations, which are fun to pull at those points. Thanks for the game, mate. Why are you awake, Aksu? It's like I don't know, like 20 to 2 or something silly. 20 to 12. You should probably go to sleep. Uh, like you were watching a lot of the stream as well yesterday, from what I saw. Anyway, with that in mind, I'm gonna go to bed because like at least one of us has to go to bed. So thank you everyone. That was a blast. Watching Worlds was wild. Like seeing the decks which came out. Obviously, again, huge shout out to Arizona, the winner, and everyone who played. And with that in mind, I'm off to bed. Freedan, thank you for the game. That was a fun game. Like the deck can pull some shit off. I'm scared about Augustus testing stuff. That worries me. That means he's scheming. Probably while he's in Augustus, if you're still in the chat, you flying? You're probably flying somewhere, right? Okay. Right. Thanks everyone. It's been a fun stream today, and I hope you have fun playing as and against PE for the rest of the month. Or kill RH. One or the other. It's all good stuff, isn't it? Everyone loves it.